Last question. All these questions tonight have been like so incredible. I'm just really happy. But this last question was another super amazing question, talking about how there was reporting from the Intercept about how NYPD had partnered with IBM, and they've been developing facial recognition without anybody knowing on the general public. I believe in privacy rights. I'm a really strong believer in privacy rights and technological privacy rights, and I believe in the right for all people to own their own data. So right now, you have all of these companies tracking. It's like kind of scary to talk about, but it's true. You have all these companies that are like tracking where you're going. Apps on your phone. Like sometimes even we download games on our phone and we think that the games are innocuous. Well, they're free because they start tracking you. And then they sell that data. And so for me, I think that, I believe that what we need right now and the prescription of right now is a 21st century revival of the social movements that we had in the 50s and 60s. I believe that we need a 21st century labor rights movement. I believe we need a 21st century civil rights movement. I believe that we need a 21st century environmental movement. And so on and so forth, 21st century indigenous rights movement. I believe that we need to pick up where we left off. And when it comes to this issue, I believe that it's a civil rights issue. I believe that our data is part of who we are, our behavior is who we are, and we need to own that, and no one should be able to track it unless we give consent. So with this issue, I think that it's hard, and the other issue, and the main thing that you brought up too, is how this can perpetuate discrimination and bias. It's so important to talk about this issue because we think of robots or like computer programs as like agnostic. It's like, oh, it's a robot that did it, it just like calculated that. But humans program robots. And all of these dots connect. You grow up and communities of color are concentrated, and you have the state that underfunds our schools. That means less computer programmers come out of communities like ours, which means in Silicon Valley is largely just one race. And so most programmers, most tech CEOs are all one race. They all come from one background. A lot of them are from the suburbs. So people are all programming their assumptions into these profiles. And what they find over and over and over again is that these programs, any program that you run, whether it's a facial recognition program, whether it's your iPhone X, underserved communities of color, and actually implicates them. Like it's like that sad, funny thing, but it's like not that funny, but pretty sad, where it's like when, they didn't test iPhone X's enough on African American and Latino people. And so like the basic phones couldn't even open, or they would replicate. It was a lot easier for two people, if you were not white, it was a lot easier, like if you were black, it was a lot easier for another black person to open your iPhone X. If you were Asian, same thing, etc. Because when only one population is programming, then you basically program those biases into that. And so that is the risk that we run with the NYPD facial recognition. So it becomes a racial justice issue, but then it also becomes a privacy issue. We shouldn't be watched without our consent. That's my belief. And I think that there's always a balance with safety, and that's absolutely important. But even if public transit does have surveillance, it should be disclosed, and that surveillance should be disclosed. But yeah, so I think that in terms of that, we need to really demand one of the things that I talk about is the United States GDPR. And what that means is, so in Europe has much more privacy protections than we do here in the United States. So actually Google is held to a much higher standard. They don't install, like companies are legally not allowed to install these little tracking pixels and stuff. It's illegal in Europe. And as a result, people have a right to a lot more privacy than we do in the United States. And so I advocate for a 21st century GDPR, and I also think that you need to have the ability to own your data, because a lot of tech corporations don't make money because they're selling anything. They don't make money because they're operating like a normal business. They're making money because they're collecting a lot of data that you don't really have the opportunity to give permission. And so they just collect a whole bunch of free stuff. It's like, wouldn't it be weird if I just followed you around all day and then just like took notes and then sold what I observed? Yeah. That would be really weird. And if you weren't allowed to say, yo, get away. Like, yeah, exactly. If you weren't allowed to say, can you give me some space? That's what's happening to us digitally. We're being followed around, and we don't have the opportunity to say no. And so I believe that we need to shore up our civil and individual rights when it comes to data collection, public or private. So that's kind of my response there.